Just when you thought it was over, more backups. The backup on the River Kwai. We don't need no stinking backups. Whatever you want to say. I won't even do horrible racist accents or anything like that, like in the movie. But nevertheless, today we're going to continue talking about backups and talk about online backup providers. We have some audio-visual aids to talk about and other ways you can do that. So this episode brought to you by Camacho 2020 for President and Brondo. It's got what plants crave, electrolytes. So be sure and stay tuned.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. If your users are going to keep putting risky stuff on your machine, you're screwed. So, Tom can help us understand the complexity of blockchain.
I was reading through the show notes, man.
In binary, it would be 001. Who cares? But it's probably not significant anyway. It'd be like you're looking out through the HAL dot, you know, like, hey, Dave.
It's like Sims, but with, you know,
It would be like
I
Sims.
instead of
only-
AI.
Okay. Sorry, we were all floored by the new intro, so I was like deer in the headlights, like kind of thing. But look, it's Russ. He's here. It's like he's still real.
I'm in people here.
He's got a
living
coat
flesh.
on, but you know,
I'm cold.
Like, oh, really?
Yeah.
It's like
It's not my
summertime
office.
outside.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
we'll worry
it's
about
like-
it later.
Oh, well. Today we're talking about online backup providers and some different ones, and we're going to talk about some different companies that you can purchase cloud backup stuff from. We're going to talk about a few other ways you can look at to back up things offline out of band, because all that stuff is pretty important to me in terms of having backups. I use quite a few different approaches to backup, really, because I want to be able to have a recovery of all my material, and that's what worries me more than backing it up, is that I can get it back. And I know that sounds stupid, but the truth is that recovery is so much more difficult than backing up, and people don't even do backups, let alone trying to rebuild this thing. Because if you've ever had a crash, so some of you probably had like, oh, my flash drive went bad and my term paper was on it. Okay, that's something.
Or your dissertation.
Or your dissertation. or worse, you know, like your laptop hits the floor and goes, yee! You know, and that's the end of it. And you're going, I wonder how much things I can recover and what was backed up. So I like to have that kind of multi-tiered. It's like security is, you know, in layers. I like to have backup in layers because I don't know exactly what I'm going to need to save myself from when you start getting into that. So initially, I was going to show you a couple of out-of-band things before we talk about the providers, because I brought audio-visual aids.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Heavy ones, too.
So
Jesus.
listen. So look at this. This is a spindle.
You don't say.
If you ever wondered when they say don't fold, spindle, or mutilate, this is a spindle. These are DVDs, and DVDs hold 4.7 gigs of information.
For single layer.
For single layer. Yeah, I mean, you can get bigger ones, too. You get double-sided ones that have 9. But this giant stack here of 100 DVDs, I didn't count them, so I might be lying. It could be 97. This is 500 gigs. That's it. This giant stack is 500 gigs of storage. So for most of us, that's not even going to be a drop in the bucket of how much stuff you've got saved.
Right.
If you start now, a lot of it may be junk, but if you've got pictures, movies, videos, or just even text files, it starts to add up quick, and you start saving stuff and saving stuff. The only thing I still use these things for is I archive stuff on this. So after so many years, my sort of window is 5 years. After 5 years, I take folders and things that I have, and I take them off my hard drives, and I put them on these things. And these don't last forever, by the way, but they last a long time. And I figure that they last long enough that if I really, really need to go back, and I've only had to do it 2 or 3 times in my whole life where I had to go back 7 years or 5 years looking for a paper I wrote or something, I can go back to this, and I just label them with the year, and I say, okay, this is 2016 or 2005 or whatever it is. Yeah. And I'll put that on a couple of DVDs, and I put them in a folder, and I just put it away.
That's what I do with my email, you know, because we're on an academic calendar, so we have to go from fall to spring, Doug knows this. And so what I do is after my PST file in Outlook gets so big after that year, I want to offload it. And so I'll put it, usually it's a few gigs. I usually put it on a DVD and then close it so my Outlook opens
I
faster.
use Thunderbird. I do the same thing. So I have folders that go, I actually do 5 years. I have five years of folders on my Gmail. And then after 5 years, I take that oldest folder and I just download it and I put the PST on a DVD and I save it. So if I ever want to go back,
you can.
And I will tell you, I'll always be deposing. Always have your life thinking about what will I say at the deposition when they say. Now the flip side of that is if you store stuff, you're supposed to store it. Yeah. If you didn't store it and you say I'm total chaos, I shred everything in 5 hours, then you're okay. Right. But if you save stuff, you're going to get in trouble. So that was one thing. So here I'll show you this. This is a more commercial kind of model of things. This is, I just bought this. I ordered it just for the show. Oh. It's an 8 terabyte enclosure. So it's got a built-in hard drive. And you could break it open, but you literally have to break it, I think, to get the hard drive out. But it's got an 8 terabyte, like 5,200 RPM hard drive in it. And it cost $140. And so this is a pretty nice way to back things up. And just like it is here, if you unplug it, it's safe from ransomware. It's safe from malware. It's safe from just about everything except hardware failure. So if I take my drive image, and by an image, I literally make a full image of my main drive. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I take that full image and put it on here, and it's a 1 terabyte drive. So I can actually make probably about 6 copies of it and put it on here. So if I've got 6 months worth on here, then I can start rolling the oldest ones. I'll delete the oldest one and keep, because this is for everything is gone, and I need to get back up and running right now. So how am I going to get back? My hard drive failed, ransomware got me, whatever. And my plan on that would be I get another SSD drive, which is what I have for my main drive on my desktop machine at home or your laptop or whatever. And I'm going to put the SSD drive in, and I'm going to copy this image. I'm going to restore the image. And I have a restore disk. So if you don't have a restore disk, you better get one. I have a restore disk that would take that image that's on here and put it back on my main drive, and then I could boot back up. So that's probably about a 4 or 5 hour kind of problem. Yeah. And that's good, because if you can run to Best Buy, grab another SSD drive, and be back up and running in 4 or 5 hours after a complete failure, that's pretty sweet. I also save other odds and ends on here, like my picture file and stuff like that. So I'll just make a copy of it, put it on it, and it stays unplugged. So these kind of drives that I use are never plugged into my system except when I'm copying something over. Yeah. So the rest of the time they're safe, and that way ransomware can't touch this, because if someone's up to that, we're done.
But one thing I want to focus on that you said that's super important, so our viewers know. Number one, run antivirus on your computer before you perform the backup, because if you plug it into an infected machine, it becomes infected and no longer useful. But number two, what you said, which is super important, is you want to really make sure that you don't use the actual out-of-band backup. You make a copy of it to that flash, to the SSD drive or USB, another drive, and leave that alone. Yep. Right, and then use the copy to restore.
And that's why this stuff was always such a good idea. It's just not feasible. Right. I mean, having this, there's no way malware can attack this right now. Right. I mean, it's impossible. So,
because they can't write to it anymore.
Exactly.
It's
so I don't care what happens to you if you've got these things. But the problem is like, wow, let's do this once a month. Yeah. And they're not expensive, but it's like, wow, this will take forever.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to back up to optical
if you had to back up 500 gigs on this, it would take you like 40 hours. It would be ridiculous.
And Blu-ray, same way. You can't just say, oh, another 40 gigs. Well, but it still takes that amount of time to write that data.
It's going to take a long time to burn those out.
It sure is, yeah.
The other one I brought, this is a cheaper solution, and so some people would think this is cooler, and some people think it's less cool. This is what I do. So this little gadget here is just a tray that plugs into USB 3.0 or even better, eSATA, because eSATA is super fast. Is this faster than 3.0?
I don't remember.
I think eSATA.
They're comparable. I know that.
I think 3.0 is a little faster, but you can experiment with that. If you can plug it directly into your motherboard bus, it's really, really fast to use eSATA, which is what I do. So I actually have a connector that goes directly in the motherboard, and then it sticks out of the machine on a little port, and you can plug in directly to it. So I don't actually use the USB 3.0. But this thing, you can plug 2 drives, and you can get these with more drives. You can literally just plug the drives in, and it just sits on the table. And these are two 4 terabyte drives, so you could get 8 or whatever, however big you want, or however small you want, and plug them in, and they act like drives on your system. And again, you can then just copy things off of your system onto here and then unplug it. So I just reach down and unplug it when I'm done, and that way malware can't actually get, I don't even unplug it from the system, I just unplug the power.
Yeah.
And so it spins down, and this one actually you can turn it off. So if you push the off button, it spins the drives down. So it's got a cache in it. So it actually buffers the input, and it spins down and makes sure everything got written. But if you just wait a little while, you'll be good on that, even if you don't have fancy little features like that. Because you can get these things super cheap.
Yeah.
Roswell makes one. It's like $19, and they'll support just about anything. Just check your throughput. That's the only thing I'm going to tell you. Make sure you can get enough data on here to make it feasible. Because I actually was experimenting. I'm being attacked by a barcode here. So I see I had it on my shirt because everybody was commenting about my barcode. So I've got one on my shirt now. If your throughput is really, really slow, I was doing some tests. So I actually tried to upload my latest image to my online server, and the estimated time to upload was 260 hours. Ooh. And yeah, that's a long time. In fact, that's so long that I would be concerned the backup's no longer viable by the time it got uploaded. I mean that's, you're talking like 10 days for this thing to upload, which is ridiculous. So these are some other offline, out-of-band storage solutions that you could consider. And there's plenty of other approaches to this. It's just you need to figure out something that works for you that you can disconnect so that it's not going to get infected when everything else gets infected. And then again, to restore, you're just plugging this stuff back in, and you've got an image sitting on here, and you say, okay, I got a restore disk. I'm going to boot up with that. Mine's a DVD. So I pop the DVD in. That restore goes looking for these things and loads. Be sure you have drivers. If you need certain drivers and things to run any of this equipment, be sure you put those on the DVD that you're using for restores.
And with devices like this, too, Doug and I were talking about this before the show, they make similar devices where it does a disk-to-disk clone. So if you take one of these disks out and throw it in a second device, you could put that in there, and this will automatically clone to another disk so that you have a third backup.
This particular one doesn't do that. They also make these that have RAID 1.
Oh, yeah.
They make them that have RAID 0 so you can share the 2 drives, like we talked about, if you don't know what those mean last week. But RAID 1 will make mirrors of the 2 drives, and they do just have a straight up cloner. So you can just, like Russ said, you pop a disk in, and then this disk is copied onto that disk, and you got 2, and you can take that disk out and put it in a safety deposit box or something like that. So if you got really, really scary stuff, or you live in a dangerous environment where things may get stolen, because I will warn you about one last thing before I shut up about this. Remember this. If somebody steals your stuff, it happens, and I did a consulting job on this once, they may take your backups too. And I did this for a company, and their servers got stolen, and the backups were in the servers. And they had tapes on backup, but the person stole the server, and the tape was in the server. And they said, is there any way we can get that back? And I said, let me use my superpowers to find this person. I'm like, what do you mean will you get it back? But then I found it. The tape was sticking out of the front of the server, and he had to have been carrying it. And he threw the tape away outside. It was laying in the alley, and I went and found it. And they were like, wow, you're like amazing. And I was like, look for a guy with a bruise on his chest that says Mac Store, because he was running with his server that weighed about 100 pounds, banging him in the chest.
Oh,
and
man.
We saw it on the video, so you could see that the tape was sticking out and hitting him when he was running. And I was like, that's why he pulled it out and threw it away. But anyway, so there's some different options, but find something that works for you. And you may want to actually put the stuff off site. You may want to take the drive and say, this is my family photo collection. This is my financial records. I'm going to actually take this drive, and I'm going to put it in a safety deposit box somewhere that's not here. And it doesn't even have to be a safety deposit box. You can put it at your friend's house and let them put theirs at your house, and then you can share. They may take your drive and look at it, but you could put it in a safety deposit box or all kinds of different places. Take it to work and put it in a drawer and lock it. And you've got something that if your house burns or it gets stolen or whatever, or floods, fire, famine, rains of frogs, toads.
Rain of frogs,
A rain of toads or frogs. Either one would be bad. I think frogs are worse than toads. But frogs are kind of like, if toads are dry, and, but regardless. Okay, we got a little off subject there about fire and famine and things. So then I went ahead, and Russ looked at some stuff too. We started looking at some different solutions that were online, and this is not a scientific study. So I didn't go out and look at every possible one. I didn't go out and try to really develop all these different things. I just went and looked at some providers that were out there. I looked at some of the ones I used, and I picked another one just off of a list. So I went and found a list of, great online cloud backup providers that were rated high, and I said, I'm going to pull these down. And I wanted to look at some different things that they did, and I wanted to look at how big are they. So what do you get when you actually subscribe to one of these services in terms of space? Can you encrypt it? Meaning, can you protect it online? Because we talked last week about how a system admin could access your stuff because they have root access to the drive somewhere. Somebody does. Right. And, they can say, oh, our policy is that would never happen. And I'm like, yeah, sure. That makes people never do things that are in violation of policy. Oh, my God. Could you do an image? Would it back up a whole image, or does it just back up increments? And by that I mean, does it just back up files that you select, or does it back up the whole drive image, which is two very different things that we've talked about on previous shows. So you might want to be aware of that. And I just sort of did a quick thing, a thought about how safe is it from malware in terms of, did I feel like it was vulnerable to, and pretty much they all are, my answer to all those is probably going to be yes, absolutely. But I just thought I'm going to see what they suggest about it. And I looked at SLAs and I looked at the product, and I know you looked at some too. My list was, the ones I looked at were iDrive, which I actually started using, Crash Plan, which I also have, Carbonite, which I used to have, and Acronis, which were 4 that were highly rated on a list from some magazine somewhere. I didn't, again, not scientific. I just pulled up a search and said, okay, what do they show? And I thought I would look at it. You had some others you wanted to add.
I'm a Mac user, so as you know, so I use iCloud. It's relatively inexpensive, but we'll talk about that later. And then some people I know use Dropbox as well. I'm not a fan of Dropbox. I don't know that the security is there. It's certainly not for one specific client that I have. But a couple of people I know do use it for photos and stuff. Media.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I've used Dropbox for that purpose. I particularly use Dropbox for temporary backups. So I have been on site working somewhere, and I had a laptop that they gave me, and I wanted to copy some files off it just in case it got stolen. One of our consultants got his laptop stolen in a restaurant one time. A person just walked by the table, and he was sitting there talking, and the guy literally just reached down and grabbed it and ran. And by the time everybody kind of went, what just happened? The guy's like gone, and the laptop is gone. And Chris was like, oh, I spent all night working on that report. And I'm like, well, you backed it up, right? He was like, I made a copy of it. And I'm like, and you put that copy where? And he was like, on the laptop. I'm like, great, that's good, Chris. Yeah, it's gone. So guess what you get to do today? So the first one I looked at was iDrive, because I was most familiar with that because I had just looked at it. And the cost... And some of these costs, I'm not giving you any kind of guarantee here or warranty. This was just me quickly looking on the internet. The cost of iDrive that I paid was $69.50 a year. So that's pretty cheap. I mean, that's about $6 a month that I was paying. And I got 2 terabytes of space, which is a lot for that. I saw there was a star on it when I was looking at it, and it said first year. So I'm guessing, of course, what you do in that case is after the first year, cancel it, switch to somebody else who's giving you a deal, and then you can switch back later.
It's like credit card offers.
Well, that's 0%. Why I switched to iDrive. I had another one that made me a great deal for a year. And after the year was up, they're like, okay, your 1 year is up, and now your price is going from $69.50 to $3,000, and you only get 60 gigs of space. Feel free to add all the space you want. And I was like, cancel, cancel, cancel. And I switched to iDrive because I saw an ad for it, and I thought, I'll try it. Because, like I said, I use multiple approaches to this. Did it have both images and incrementals? And the answer was it did, actually, but the image is local. So it will make an image of your drive. So I actually made an image of my hard drive, my 1 terabyte SSD drive with iDrive, and I put it on here. And it took about 2 hours to copy that almost 1 tera. It didn't have any compression or anything. So because it's a bitwise image, that means everything is copied exactly, and it will boot. So that means if I put it back on an SSD drive, it's going to boot up. So I put that on here, and to restore it, I need a restore disk that made, and I could do that. But it mostly was designed to make incremental backups of my files. So I selected my whole drive and told it to move all that stuff up onto online, and it did that over a period of days. It didn't do it all at once. It copied, like 600,000 files up onto their site. But I did, with 2 terabytes, I had plenty of room for all that, and it upped. Now that's not bootable.
Yeah,
so those are just file backups, but the image is bootable. But that was local, so I had to still take care of that myself. And I could have taken I could take the image and put it back onto the iDrive and upload it, but it was going to take over 200 hours to do that. So I decided that wasn't going to work. The good news about this one also, and I don't get paid to advertise for them. They did that included multiple computers, so you could share you could share the 2 terabytes across a whole bunch of computers without any penalty. They had different plans. When I went to look at Crash Plan, it was gone. Crash Plan said they'd been deprecated, so they don't exist anymore, and they said go to Carbonite. So Carbonite was the next one I looked at. Woo! Hi, Carbonite. When I pulled that one up, I went, are you kidding me? And maybe I looked at it several times because I was confused with the price. The price of Carbonite for 1 year was $288, and that's why I quit using Carbonite. I used to have Carbonite, and they jumped my price so high that I quit using it. And then get this. So for $288 a year, you only get 250 gigs of storage.
Wow.
So I was like, am I reading that right? Yikes. It was very, very expensive in my opinion. Now there may be other plans, so I'm not running the product down. I used to use it. I used it for years, and I remember I quit using it because it got really expensive. They changed the intro plan I had. It did not make images that I was aware, and I don't have it, so I couldn't really test to see if there's other features there. So feel free to look at it. It did give you a boot disk, and it would... it did not do any kind of imaging that I know of. It was just incremental backups. So basically, you'd be doing a backup off of that. It did include, I think, multiple computers. So you could again, but with 250 gig, my laptop's going to blow that out of the water.
I wonder how they justify that price. That's like $1 a gig.
Yeah, it was very expensive, and I was looking at their site, so I wasn't reading an article. I was actually looking at their site price plan. They may have other plans, though, and I didn't dig on it. I just looked at it. Acronis was the other one I looked at, and I used to use Acronis as well. It was $149.99 for a terabyte per year, so it was right in the same. It was right in the middle of the two. Yeah. So iDrive was really cheap. Carbonite was really expensive. Acronis was right in the middle of that. If Carbonite would like to sponsor our show, I'm sure we could give you a much better review next time. And now they're going to send their thugs after me. We walk out of here today, the Carbonite guys are going to be, hi, boys.
We'll be frozen in Carbonite.
Yeah. Ooh, that might be what happens to us next. That'd be kind of cool, though, especially if I get to drop my pants first. Who did that? That was Peter.
From
Family Guy did that on the Family Guy Star Wars stuff. So, but Acronis was $149.99 for a year. It was a 1 terabyte setup. It did do both images and incremental backups. It did have encryption. All these had encryption availability to you, so you could encrypt your backups. That takes longer because then the files have to be encrypted as they're uploaded, but that's fine. It did support multiple computers. I had one more. The last one, I just looked at it because the name was cool. Spider Oak.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was like, Spider Oak?
Spidery.
I was like, yeah, is that like a weird translation, like Bite the Wax Tadpole or something? I was like, what does Spider Oak mean? But it was a cool name, so I looked at it, so I guess it worked. Theirs was actually pretty reasonable, too. It was $129.99 a year for 2 terabytes, but it was really more of a sync. It was almost like OneDrive or some other kind of an online folder structure, which I use that as well. So I have OneDrive. And, the OneDrive, if you don't know how it works, is from Microsoft. It actually has a folder structure on your local disk. It has a folder structure on a remote disk, and they just sync all the time.
Yeah, same as Dropbox.
Yeah, so it's like Dropbox. They said their space was unlimited, but I'm not sure how that works. So you have to read the SLAs on these, and Russ had a few.
Yeah, and for your Mac people out there like me, iCloud through Apple is about $10 a month for a terabyte.
Yeah. I use that for my iPhone and iPads and everything.
Yeah, and you can encrypt, which is great. Just don't lose that encryption key, as we talked about in other shows. And so that's pretty much what I would use. I've experimented with Western Digital's My Cloud, but those aren't cloud storage in the sense that another company owns them. It's setting it up at home and then hoping that through your wireless network and through port forwarding that it works. So
and there's a bunch of other services like this that you can look at. I mean, this was certainly not an exhaustive list. We were looking at just a few of the services that were out there. You can also look at other solutions. There are shared open source solutions you can set up. And one last thing I was going to mention before we run out of time was setting up your own NAS.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to talk about in future shows was building your own NAS at home. There are multiple operating systems based on Linux that if you have old machines, because remember, you don't need a lot of crunch power to set up a NAS, you can use a chassis that you've got sitting around, put a bunch of old hard drives in it, and either run them as RAIDs, as JBODs, or something.
Clusters,
whatever, and you can put all that stuff and sit it somewhere. I have one of those as well at my house. It's got like, I think it's got 20 terabytes on it that just sits there, and files are synced. So you're basically doing what the cloud people are doing. You're just doing it locally. So if you have a gigabit network or something like that, you can run it really, really fast. And so all the machines in my house can actually back up to that NAS. Those are pretty cheap solutions if you have a little bit of hardware skill, because you can actually sit down and build those things yourself. You can also buy enclosure NAS, and that's what my next show topic is. The next week is to talk about enclosure-based storage and NAS that you can build yourself. Even if you buy the chassis, like if you go somewhere like PC Pit Stop or something like that, I've built a bunch of those. You can buy an enclosure chassis, and I thought we'd look at a few of those kind of things on the show and talk a little bit about what if you do need a lot of storage, if you want to build it yourself, you want to roll your own. You can, and a lot of people that do a lot of video, a lot of people that have a lot of like home
Photos,
video,
media,
home, like my dad had all these ancient home movies that are on 8mm, but he converted them all to digital video, and they take up a huge amount of space. And, you know, being able to store those, and he doesn't want to lose them because the old 8mm film is all deteriorated. If you try to show it, it actually strips the sprockets out. So now you can't even look at the film. You'd have to have it restored. It costs a fortune. So I wanted to look a little bit about NAS at home and what NAS is, and some different things that you might consider if you want to build your own. So next time we'll talk about that. So stay tuned, and we'll see you then. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Doug.